Are you interested in buying a business? Have you considered what could happen if that business you buy fails, especially if you sign a personal guarantee? Well, I bought two landscaping companies, I merged them together, and then about 8 months later, the business failed, and I signed a personal guarantee, and it wiped me out financially. Um, that sucks. That really sucks. And around August of 2024, I started going on LinkedIn and talking about what that's like. Um, one one reason was because I started seeing a lot of stuff on social media about how easy it is to buy a small business and how it can generate passive income and how you can have a portfolio of small businesses and that it's low risk and no money down and passive income. And that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard, especially as someone whose business failed and it signed a personal guarantee. And all I saw was a lot of people about to get themselves in a lot of trouble financially. And so nothing about a small business is passive or easy or, uh, especially if you're a first time buyer, no money down. Um, so I started talking about my experiences on LinkedIn about 6 months ago. And what I found was that a lot of people resonated with having just a little bit of clarity, a little bit of thought about what happens on the downside. And a lot of people reach out and they want to know my story, my experiences, so that they can, learn from that. And then, as they're trying to buy their first business. And so I've had that conversation a lot. And what I've realized is that I should just record this. And so that's what this is. I am talking about my story, what I experienced, and hopefully there's some words of wisdom in here that'll help you. So I'm a 10-year Air Force veteran. I joined in 2008. I dropped out of college because had bad grades and I didn't know what to do with my life. And so I joined the Air Force on a whim. I just knew I wanted something better. And the Air Force put me in financial management. Ultimately, got promoted and went on a couple deployments, met my wife, lived in Germany for 3 years, did a lot of really cool stuff with special operations, did a lot of really cool stuff with like top secret acquisition programs, and learned a lot. It really helped turn me around as a professional. But at 10 years, I was able to look forward and kind of see what my career would look like if I stayed, and I decided it was time to get out. And so it's January of 2019. I get out of the Air Force. I have no idea what I want to do. All I know for sure is that I don't want to stay in government service as a civilian employee doing the same thing for another 20, 30 years, especially if it means living in DC. Love DC, just don't want to live there. I just didn't know what was the right route for me. I didn't know what to do. And so, like a lot of veterans in my position, I decided to go to an MBA program to try to figure that out. And I actually really, really think that's a great idea for a lot of veterans. I went to NYU Stern. I just chose to do the executive MBA program out of Washington, D.C., which was a fantastic choice for me because I knew I didn't want to go into banking. I knew I didn't want to go into consulting. And as a result, I knew I didn't need the on-campus recruiting. I was very confident in my ability to get out there and sell myself to an employer. I just didn't know what my options were. So the executive program was a really good option. As I'm going through this program, Microsoft reaches out. And at the time, Microsoft was building out the federal cloud, and they were having a really tough time getting software engineers to get top secret clearances. And so they had this idea, why not find veterans who have top secret clearances and then just teach them how to code? And so they extended that offer to me, and I was one of the very first people in the first cohort to take them up on that. And I spent 6 months learning how to code, no CS background whatsoever. And then I stayed at Microsoft for 2 years building out the Azure cloud for federal clients. And it was a fantastic experience. I learned a lot about how software is developed, about how software is built, and about how it's distributed globally. And I absolutely love tech. I thought it was fantastic. But I love tinkering around in the software. I love building it. I still like to do that now. But I knew I didn't want to be a heads down developer, for the rest of my career. And so I decided to move back into like people management, became a software technical program manager at AWS and HP, and kind of was able to expand a little bit. But I still wasn't I had this entrepreneurial itch. And if you have that, you know what I'm talking about. You want the autonomy, you want the independence. And I also started to realize that, it didn't really matter how high my salary went up. It was still just a salary and it wasn't an asset. And yes, I know you can, entrepreneurship is not for everybody, but you kind of know if it is for you, or at least if you want to give it a shot. And so like, I knew that I wanted to build something for myself. I wanted to build something that gave me control, autonomy, financial security, building an asset forward. So these are the things that really kind of got me going. And NYU, when I graduated in 2021, like buying a business was not popular on social media. Nobody was talking about this. The only person talking about this was like Walker Deibel. And that's how I found his book, Buy Then Build. And so I blew through that. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. My final course at NYU was a entrepreneurial finance course. And there was one chapter in there on small business acquisitions. And I got hooked. I was like, oh my God, there's small business M&A. Who would have thought? And so that led to me discovering the Harvard Business School ETA conference. So I attended that. I attended the ETA conference in Chicago that the Chicago Booth and Kellogg schools put on. I reached out to a ton of people on LinkedIn who had acquired a business or were actively searching. I met a lot of investors. I really spent the better part of like maybe 18 months, like really digging into the space, like really trying to network and figure out what was this like. And again, this is like before it was popular. So there weren't like dedicated small business lawyers. There wasn't like dedicated small business accountants like that you see like on social media who are like here to help you. There wasn't like a real process. There was like SBA loan brokers and that's it. And then it's just really up to you to kind of figure it out. And so along the way, I realized like this is something I really want to give a shot at. And so I decided to go the self-funded searcher route. And for those of you who don't know, if you're coming from like those MBA type programs, there's really two routes if you want to buy a business for the first time. Route number one is traditional search fund. This is what Stanford started back in the 70s. The idea is that you go to some investors, you raise some cash, and then you use that money to go do a professional search. You're going to go find a business. And then when you find that business, you bring it back to the investors. Everybody agrees, you pour money into the deal, and then you buy that company. And then once you buy it, you become the CEO and you own like anywhere from 15 to 20% of the equity, and you end up becoming a CEO. And your investors are your board members. And as a result, you're kind of targeting slightly bigger companies. Like $1 to $3 million in EBITDA. So like total revenue is going to be 10 million plus. And that's kind of the game you're playing there. If you have a desire to be a middle market CEO, then that's the path for you. The other path is self-funded search, which is kind of what you see more, in the social media kind of world, because it's actually available to almost everybody through the SBA 7A loan program. If you do self-funded search, then you can take out a loan from the SBA up to $5 million by yourself with as little as $500,000, even $250,000 down, and you can lever that thing up 90%. And you can buy a business. I'm not saying that's what you should do all the time, but it is possible. And that's kind of where the self-funded searcher route comes from. And the idea is like, I'm going to go find a business on my own, using my own money. And then when I find that business, I'm going to use the SBA program and I'm going to buy that company. And then I'm the owner. Like, and if I don't take anybody's money, then I'm the 100% owner, of that company. And obviously that company is going to be smaller than the traditional search fund companies, but I'm the owner. And that really appealed to me, being the owner, having the autonomy. At the time, the idea of the economics of like owning 80% or more of a company as opposed to like 20%, I thought that was a big deal. I no longer think that, and that's a topic for another conversation. But at the time, that really spoke to me. But really, I just wanted the freedom. I wanted to be the captain of my own ship, the commander of my own team. Like that's what I wanted. And so I started searching. Initially, I started looking in defense contracting, defense tech. I had a lot of background working in DoD and working with some of our larger contracting companies and kind of seeing what that world looks like. And obviously, I had the background in tech, so I was like, defense tech makes sense to me. I was open to manufacturing, like any kind of thing where it's like it's direct government contracting, especially if we can throw some tech in the mix. And I started looking and I found a few things, but a lot of stuff that I was finding was just overpriced. I couldn't afford it as a self-funded searcher. And so I kind of just started thinking about other industries that I'd be good at. And by accident, I met a man who owned a landscaping company. And that kind of opened my eyes to the options in landscaping. So I did a nationwide search for landscaping, and I must have spent, I talked to like 150 different landscape owners all across the country. It was a combination of broker outreach, a combination of proprietary search, and just getting on the phone and talking to as many small business owners as I possibly could. And that was fantastic because you get really hung up on those first couple businesses that you are introduced to, and you think they're like really good deals until you get to deal number 35 and deal number 74, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of other businesses out there. There's a lot of other opportunity out there. And so that's why it's so great to actually dive deep on your search and try to find something that's really specific for you. And so long story short, I met a man who was running a landscaping company in San Diego County. I really liked him. He's a wonderful guy, older guy, ready to retire. I met him on accident because I was planning on doing some landscaping in my own home. And then it's like, I tell people, it's like when you are looking to buy a car and you decide you're going to buy a Jeep Wrangler, and then all of a sudden all you see on the roads are Jeep Wranglers. And it was kind of like that. I wasn't necessarily looking for this guy or this landscaping company, but when I saw him, I was like, this is an older guy. He's running his own company. And so we started talking. He came out for the sales call, and one thing led to another. And he had a wonderful little business right there in San Diego. And he was doing all the right things right. Like the business on the back end had all kinds of issues, like with all kinds of like business related issues, like marketing and bookkeeping and things that you would expect to have like to not be perfect in a small business. But the things that were perfect were the things that really mattered. The owner had a ton of integrity, super nice guy, really personable with his customers, with his suppliers, with his employees. And you could tell that that's just how he ran everything. And as a result, he was a great salesman. And he was always doing what he could to make sure that his employees were taken care of. And his employees were less of his employees and more of like his teammates. The team had been largely together for like over 15 years. And so it's just, I had never met a small time, and I say small time just to put it in perspective, but he was doing $1.5 million in revenue, and he had over 100 5-star reviews on Google by himself. And I don't see any landscapers that have that. And it's not like he was tech savvy. It's just that he had to Google my business listing, and the clients and customers, without being asked, were so happy that they were leaving him 5-star reviews. And that really went a long way. And so we started talking. I got the opportunity to come into the business and kind of help him out for a little bit because I felt like I wasn't sure if this was going to be the right acquisition for me. But if it was, then it allowed me the opportunity to kind of learn a little bit ahead of time. And if it wasn't, then at least I could help him out a little bit because I really did like this guy, and at least we'd be able to help build the business a little bit. So like I brought in a CRM which they had never used before. I pulled all their customers together, and right off the bat just started an email campaign, something really basic, and got like 7 sales like immediately. And so like little things like that, like turned on Google ads, Google local service ads, like really basic stuff, and like revenue starts going up, and I liked the business. And so we kept talking about it, and after several months we got to an agreement, and I bought the company in the fall of 2023. The crazy thing that happens is that once you buy a company, then your reputation in the marketplace changes almost overnight, because everyone around you, whether it's business brokers, other business owners, legal professionals, everybody, they no longer see you as a tire kicker, and they take you seriously as a business owner. And so what had happened was, like, almost overnight, like all the other landscaping owners in the area kind of like looked up and like, oh, this guy, oh, did you hear? He bought that company. And then all of a sudden, I started getting messages from other owners who were like, hey, I'm interested in getting out. Or, there was like rumors going around of like, I'm interested in being acquired. I'm interested in being acquired. And it's kind of interesting how, like, when you're in a small community, everybody knows each other, especially if you're in the same industry. Like, some of these owners had gone to high school together. And so everybody knew, like, there's no secrets. And so within the matter of a few months, I was under LOI with 2 other landscaping companies and talking with a third. And so what originally was going to be like a very small $1.5 million acquisition was quickly looking at like a $10 million roll up, like out of nowhere. And it was not like I wasn't looking for that, didn't expect that, but that's just what happened. throughout this whole process, the best thing I did, I tell people from the beginning, as a self-funded searcher, I'd get it. You're broke. You don't have a lot of extra cash. Or I should say, you just don't want to spend money. That's what I should say. And so you're bootstrapping a lot of stuff. And that's a good thing because you're learning how to basically be a startup. But the one thing I did very, very well is that I sat down with several different lawyers and kind of talked to them about my strategy, talked about what I was going to do. And I met one that I really kind of clicked with. And I told him my strategy. He was on board. And not only was he on board, but he agreed to take me on as a client. We had a relatively small retainer. And he helped me draft a really good LOI. He even helped me prospect for clients because he and his team, they would go through the Department of State listings for the state of California and like searching by NAICS code and try to find different businesses. And, we found all kinds of stuff. And that was actually really helpful. I wasn't expecting that. So, but what I really want to point out is that it was so important that I made sure to have proper legal counsel before I bought my first business, because it's so important to have somebody who knows what they're doing in your corner, not negotiating on your behalf, but like writing your purchase agreement in such a way as to protect you. You're putting representations and warranties in there that you wouldn't know to do. And again, like, of course you wouldn't know that. You're not a lawyer, but like, it's so important to have somebody who understands your strategy and understands what you're trying to do and is there on your behalf, like helping you get that done. And so I bought the first company, had several opportunities come up to buy additional companies. And so we're just moving quickly and ended up buying business number 2 only 6 weeks later, it wasn't even 2 months. We bought business number 2 almost 2 months later. And immediately started bringing that one in while still negotiating with businesses 3 and 4. And then that's when things started to unravel. And they started to unravel because there were a lot of things that I did as a first-time buyer that I did wrong, and other things that there's always headwinds that you don't expect. And I tell people, buying a business is a lot like being in the military. And I would have civilians ask me all the time, like, what's it like being in the military? And I can tell you what it's like to go to boot camp. I can tell you what it's like to wear the uniform. I can tell you what deployments are like. But if you've never done it, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Like, I can paint you a picture and you can watch like Saving Private Ryan or something and you can have an idea. And it's not that crazy, but you just don't know. And that's like everything in life. If you haven't experienced it, you don't know, especially if it's something completely different. And I'm telling you that, if you're a first-time buyer and you've never owned a small business, you do not understand until you're in the seat. You just don't understand until you actually are the owner. Because when you are the owner, then you feel the weight of payroll. Then you feel the weight of strategy. You feel the weight of your employees and the culture and the importance of growth. And most importantly, you feel the weight of the debt you signed for. Because you're the only one responsible for that. All your employees can quit tomorrow, but the bank doesn't care. You signed the personal guarantee, so you've got debt. And so all of these things become very, very real. And there are always going to be headwinds. And when you buy, you have to expect that you're going to have a minimum, like you're going to have some headwinds. You're going to have like a 15% revenue drop just because of the chaos of transition. Just of you taking over, if you're doing asset purchase, and you're now like having to relist all the insurance policies on your vehicles and having to account for all your gear. And we're not even talking about like switching over payroll and, employee and cultural issues. Like the employees getting to know you and getting used to trusting you, and you figuring out like which employees are like ones that you can rely on and which ones are, you probably can't rely on. And there's so much happening all at once. It's a waterfall. And so you have to expect you're going to run, like things are going to get dropped. You have to expect that sales are going to go down. You have to expect that there's going to be, like someone's going to drop the ball, probably a few times. And so that's why things like the HBR guide talk so much about, buy a business and try, that's already doing pretty well, that's already running pretty well, because you're a first time guy or gal and you don't know what you're doing and you want to give yourself 6 to 12 months to figure it out. And you don't want to break it. So you don't want to break things. But the issue is that that's not always the case. Sometimes things are already broken and you have to jump in there and do stuff. And so now I'm just going to talk about the things that I messed up and things I could have done better and the things I learned. So things, man, I've had a lot of time to look back and really think about, the things I could have done better, and the things that were beyond my control. But here's a few things. Number one, culture is the most important thing when you buy a business, not finances. That was something I did not understand. So I thought the finances were the most important thing when you buy a company. I'm looking at the EBITDA, I'm looking at the add backs, I'm looking at the SDE, I'm running my model, I'm trying to determine like how much my debt service coverage ratio will be able to, support, and I'm doing all that, right? I'm double checking. I did a pretty good job of like double checking my customers and like finding out like if the revenue was higher quality, is it project, is it recurring, all that stuff. And so I was pretty solid on the finances. Did an okay job on working capital. I think I was a little under, and it could have been better, but not bad. And so like I was very focused on the financials part of it because I'm like, I'm thinking I'm buying finances, I'm buying a business. But the thing that I really discounted, that I now think is the most important thing, is that I'm buying the culture. And a business is the direct reflection of its owner. And if you've got a business that's been operating for 20 or 30 years, then it's going to operate exactly like the owner who runs it, And so you have to understand that like if you're buying a company, you're buying the culture. Unless you plan on firing all your employees on like within the first week, that's the culture you're buying. And that doesn't change quickly. If at all, really. I mean, it's going to take you a long time. If your plan is to move slowly, it's going to take you a long time to turn that ship of culture into something that more reflects you as the new owner, because the previous owner hired everybody. The previous owner had relationships with sellers with suppliers and with vendors and everybody else. And now you're taking over those relationships, and a lot of times those relationships do not transfer. And if a business has been operated in a certain way for a long time, people don't like change. And so everyone expects that you're just taking over for the seller, that you're just going to be that person, just younger, or everything's going to keep going the same way. And like you may come into this with ideas of like, oh man, we're going to get off, paper checks. We're going to move to digital payments. We're going to really clean up this accounts receivable. We're going to put ourselves on a CRM. We're going to blah, 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 blah. And change is hard, especially when you're taking over a team that is not yours, especially if you're buying in an industry that you are new to. So this is the other thing. So like, okay, so I bought a landscaping company. Landscaping is regulated. It is licensed. And we did project landscaping. So it's very licensed. It's not, so you have the commercial maintenance where it's like, the cut and blow and tree trimming stuff. You don't need a license for that. Anybody can do it. You can just buy a lawnmower, go cut some grass. It's not a big deal. But if you decide that you're going to do projects, if you're going to do installs, well, that's construction. And so if you're going to build a deck, if you're going to dig out an area for a pool, if you're going to do retaining walls, and if you're going to, trim trees or do anything like over 12 feet, now you need a license. And licenses come with insurance and come with bonding and all kinds of things. And I'm not a landscaper. And so, just like everybody else, if you're buying an HVAC company or if you're buying a plumbing company, these companies come with licenses, most of them. And so you have to understand that like when you're buying, you need to know how your business runs and how it operates. But at the same time, you're brand new. So you're learning as fast as you can. You probably don't own the license. And it's really important because you really rely on your employees a lot because they're the ones who know how to do the work. And, somebody in that business has to have the license, depending on how you do your acquisition. And so, if you buy a licensed business, you can't just fire everybody on day one because you don't know what the fuck you're doing. So, it's those are the kind of issues you walk into. And so it's already hard enough when you're trying to buy a business for the first time and you don't know what you're doing and you're having to learn the business side of it, what it means to have proper cash flow analysis, what it means to deal with your cash conversion cycle and your working capital, and you're building relationships, and you're reaching out to suppliers, and you're transferring payroll, and you're signing new insurance policies, and all of these things. And at the same time, you're trying to build relationships with your employees and figure out how the jobs are actually done. And you're leaning on them a lot because you don't know what you're doing. And you have to give yourself time to learn that. And at the same time, you have to get the licenses, and there's so much that goes into it. And so that's one of the reasons why I tell people who are first-time buyers, one of the things I would do if I went back is I probably would not have bought a landscaping company in my first buy. I would have bought something that I knew more about. Like I probably would have stuck with either government contracting or defense contracting or something in tech, because I would have been much more comfortable jumping in, rolling up my sleeves, and getting to work on day one. Even if I still needed to learn a lot, I would have been more comfortable on day one. So that's not to say that you can't be successful if you buy an industry that you're unfamiliar with. It's just another thing to add to your risk analysis. So that's one. Well, I guess that's two. Number one was the culture thing, like really understanding culture. Like going forward, I do plan to buy businesses in the future, but culture is the biggest thing. Unless I'm just buying straight assets without people, culture is going to be the biggest thing. I'm buying employees. So making sure that it's a culture that you can step into and be comfortable in is super, super important, because a business is not real estate. If real estate goes under, at least there's still some land and a building that you can sell. There's some sort of residual value. But if a business goes under, there's nothing left. And before you start saying, oh, well, you've got equipment, you've got trucks, and you blah, blah, blah. I was running a landscaping company. It's very capital intensive. I got lawnmowers, and I got trucks, and I got trailers, and I got all kinds of stuff. But if you're operating at, a couple $1 million of revenue, and all your stuff, like it's already depreciating, and you're using it all the time, you're lucky if it's worth $100,000. Like you really are. Let's just be clear. So and it doesn't matter. Like the stuff, the assets, the physical assets of the business are not enough to make up for whatever the losses of the business, because a business is a collection of people who come together to create value that is bigger than what they would be individually. It's not real estate. And so there is no back end, collateral. And that's why you can loan on real estate and you don't loan on small businesses. Like the collateral profile is completely different. And so, small soapbox there. But anyway, that's one thing. So understanding the culture, understanding that change is going to take a long time, understanding the impact of going into a regulated industry or a licensed industry. And these are all things that you can overcome. These are just things that you really need to think about, because I knew these going in, but I did not realize these were the most important things. Having quality finances is just your ticket to get you in the door. Like that is the foundation. That is what you have to buy a business. But that's just step one. If you don't have quality finances, then we don't get to step one. But to get to step one, you have to have quality finances. But then to move on to step 2 and 3 and 4, there needs to be solid culture. There needs to be opportunity for growth. There needs to be risk mitigation and all these other things that you have to line up. And those things are going to be highly specific on you as the buyer, because everybody's different and every business is different. And so you have to make sure that the business you buy is the right fit for you, especially as a first-time buyer. So more things that I messed up. I relied too much on the experience of some of my employees. I thought at the time that it was wise to, do what I could to let the business operate like it always had been. And, there's some truth to that. And there's a reason why, HBR talks about that and making sure that you're not breaking the business. But at the same time, even if you have somebody who is a long-time experienced employee and they know what they're doing based on their experience and also based on how the previous owner ran the business. And so the way you want to run the business may be completely different. So they may be really, really good at understanding like a landscaping project or an HVAC project, but really bad at pricing, or really bad at understanding cash conversion, or really bad at like the business side of it. And so as the owner, you have to remember it's all on you. And so you have to have the courage, which I didn't have, and I'll be honest, I did not have this right off the gate. You have to have the courage to be like, this is what I think we should do, and we're going to move forward on this because it's on me. So I tried to, move our customers onto digital payment structures, things like that. Like we had a lot of accounts receivable that I tried to clean up, and we had made some progress there, but not enough. Moving from a weekly payroll to a bi-weekly payroll to try to expand our cash conversion cycle a little bit, things like that. But, ultimately, like the business failed. And I can look back and I can say that, I can definitely pinpoint the things that I could have done better. I can also pinpoint the things I did right. I mean, we grew revenue like 35%. We didn't grow profitability enough though, because I didn't push hard enough on the net margins, and I should have done that. Then there are plenty of things I just didn't know. Like I didn't know how expensive insurance was going to be. Like okay, here's a good one. So like when I was doing my comps, I based it off the insurance cost off of the insurance that the previous owner had been paying. That made sense, like for vehicles and liability and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, cool, that's the insurance cost. I did not realize that like after I bought the business, like my insurance costs were going to be higher because the insurance company doesn't know me. The previous owner had been in business for like 30 years. They knew him. Like he had a history, a safety record, like all kinds of stuff. Like they didn't know me. I'm a young guy. I'm a new guy. I've never had experience in the business, and I got the max rate. And so like my insurance costs went up like, I think like 30% like on day one. And so that sucks. That was something I did not expect. And so like there's all of these little things that you don't think about, or you wouldn't know to think about like until you're actually in it. Anyway, fast forward, we ended up having to close the business 8 months later. And so it was a real struggle trying to keep things afloat, trying to make sure we're making payroll, trying to clean up accounts receivable, trying to make the business more efficient, and definitely saw some progress, but not enough progress. And then we ran into some headwinds that we just couldn't overcome. And this is the part that people don't talk about, because when you run into insolvency, so when you run a business and that business is incorporated, so it's an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp, there comes a point to where it's a gray area, but we run into insolvency. Now you have a fiduciary duty, not just to your business, but also to the capital stack. So the people who own the debt, whether that means the bank, whether that means, the seller's note, and you're now liable for that. And so your decisions that you make when you're on the verge of bankruptcy, when you're on the verge of insolvency, have legal consequences, because you have to make decisions that are best for the business and best for even for the debt holders as well. You can't wipe them out intentionally just because you want to try to make things happen. And there's the famous FedEx story of like how FedEx was down to like its last like $5,000 or $10,000, and the CEO was like, well, screw it, if we don't get more money, we're dead anyway. So he takes that money to Vegas and rolls it, and makes like 50 grand. He keeps the business alive, and obviously they're successful now. That's why I say it's a gray area, because that's probably not legal, but it worked out, so who cares? Anyway, so you get to a point where you're insolvent and you can't make payroll. California is very, very strict about making sure that you pay your employees. So, every dollar we had to go to payroll. Like that's like the one thing that pierces the corporate veil, paying your employees, which it should. And so understanding that, like there came to a point where it's like, all right, we have to shut down. We have to close the doors. And, it got all the way to the point where like, we cannot make our next payroll, and there's no way that we can. And, when the team hears that, they're gone. Everybody walks off the job and we're done. So at this point, the business is closed. Well, technically we're insolvent. We haven't declared bankruptcy, but we're not operating. We have no employees. And at this point, this is where bankruptcy comes in. And when you move into bankruptcy, and I know this now because I've talked to a lot of people who have bought businesses and had those businesses fail, just like me. One of the reasons, there's two main reasons you don't hear people talk about this. Reason number one, it's not fun to get on LinkedIn and get on social media and be like, hey guys, I bought this business, it failed, and I lost a ton of money and it wiped me out. People don't like talking about that. Well, we do like talking about that after we've been a success, after we've had the $1 million business, the multi-million-dollar exit. That's when we talk about it. We don't talk about it like when we fail. We're all proud of our failures after we're successful. We don't like to talk about the failures in the moment. That makes sense. It sucks. But the other reason is because when you move into bankruptcy, a lot of times lawsuits are involved. And so there's the litigation issue. And going forward, I'm talking generally about what happens. Not necessarily my specific situation, but generally speaking, what happens Based on the fact that at this point I've talked to nearly 25 people who have bought a business in the last 5 years and that business has now failed. In well over 70% of the cases, you are going to move into some sort of litigation. And because there's no money in the business has collapsed, and now the bank has a liability. You have control of the assets if there are any, and you have a liability because most likely you signed a personal guarantee. And if there's a seller's note, then the seller has a liability. If there, other suppliers have liabilities. So there's a lot of liabilities to go around. And generally speaking, you move into bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy court, looks at, all the assets of your business and you, and decides who gets what. But before you get there, there's usually going to be some sort of litigation because there's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of people saying, you owe me this, you owe me that, and you have to get to a point where you get to a settlement. And again, in 70% of these cases of people that I've spoken to, the settlement, includes a non-disclosure agreement and a non-disparagement agreement, because you're going to come to an agreement of how to divvy up whatever's left of the business. And that agreement is what keeps everybody out of court. That agreement is what keeps you out of a long litigation cycle. And that agreement allows you to walk away, all parties to walk away with whatever is left. And, and that's it. The situation is resolved. And so that's why you don't hear people talk about it, because you legally can't. And that's why when we get to this point of the story, I just tell everybody, I don't tell you the details of the settlement. I don't tell you the details of all the details of why the business closed. I just say the situation is resolved and there's a settlement in place and we've all moved forward. And that's the most I can say. And that's the most that a lot of owners can say, who have had a business fail, because they're in a settlement agreement. And so what I found is that a lot of people out there who have owned a business have all of these lessons learned, all of these stories, all of these things that would help, first-time buyers and business owners and people who are interested in buying a business, but they don't really talk about it because A, it sucks, and B, they can't. And so that's really why I got on LinkedIn back in August of 2024 and really started pushing back on a lot of the narrative out there about how easy it is and how passive it is and how you don't need any money and all this BS that's just everywhere. Because a lot of people in the space, I'm a big fan of buying small businesses. I think it's a great opportunity. But when you go about it the wrong way, when you sign a personal guarantee on a business that is high risk, that you don't understand, and just because somebody online said it was a good idea, and you think that you can just hire a general manager and they're going to run it for you and it's just going to be mailbox money, then you're signing a one-way ticket to bankruptcy. That's all you're doing. It is stupid. It is absolutely stupid. And so, so that's why I get passionate about it. And that's also why I've been working on putting this book together. And you guys who have seen it out there, I'm working on publishing a book that's going to be, we're planning on releasing it this fall, right around Halloween, so we can kind of line it up with some of the ETA conferences. But it's a compilation of stories of business owners who have bought a business and that business has failed. And all of these stories are real. And the only difference is that they've been anonymized to remove specific details that would identify those people, because a lot of them have signed NDAs and non-disclosure, non-disparagement agreements, and they're not allowed to talk about it publicly. But so what we're doing is I'm anonymizing those stories, pulling out the lessons so that current and future searchers can have a better idea of what they're getting themselves into and some of the things that can go wrong. And I'll be very clear, I hope none of these things go wrong for you. I hope you never experience what it's like to have a business fail. I will say you learn a lot. You learn a lot. For me, it's been a $750,000 worth of tuition, but you learn a lot. And coming out of it, you're not as scared as you were going in. And it's just an experience that I'm ready to go again. I talked to somebody about a month ago who had been through a similar experience where their business failed, and it sucks. It's sleepless nights. It's your stomach is turning because I've never been sued before. You've never sued anybody else before. I've never had a settlement before. I've never had bankruptcy before. I've never tried to figure out like which of my personal assets are on the line, like all kinds of stuff that you're just not used to, and you don't know what the end result is going to be. But you learn a lot. You learn a lot about how a business operates. You learn a lot about how resilient a business operation can actually be. And then you look back and you see like what you did right, what you did wrong. And I am 300,000 times more confident in my ability to run a business now than before. And it's amazing how much you learn and you grow. And so that's a good thing. And I want to make sure that a lot of those lessons for business owners who have had those failure experiences, like those lessons are carried forward so that, people can understand. And also because, like I said at the beginning, if you don't take the time to think about the risk involved, to really understand the risk of failure, then you're not making an educated decision. You're basing your acquisition on hopes and dreams, and that's closer to gambling than investing. So you need to have a thorough understanding of the risk involved, a thorough understanding of what can go wrong, and you need to take time to really consider that. And so that's my story. For the most part, that's why I started talking about business failure, on LinkedIn and YouTube. That's why I've been, connecting with so many of you. And I want to see you guys be successful. I want to be successful. I want everybody to be successful. But the last thing I want to see is you buy a business that you're not prepared for, that you haven't taken the time to really understand if it's the right fit for you. And honestly, the last thing I want to see is you get tricked by somebody who is going to convince you that buying a business is something that you can do if you're broke. It's not. Or that you can do with no money. You can't. Or that it is going to provide passive income for you, because it won't. Those are all 100% lies. And every business owner will tell you that. So, I love it. I love the space. I love the opportunity. We need a lot of really good small business owners. I'm especially a big fan of veterans doing it, because I think a lot of times they're uniquely qualified, to be small business leaders, both in their business and in their local communities. But yeah, that's my story. Feel free to reach out if you've got any questions. Love to answer them. I do a weekly live call, so you can hop on if you got any direct questions. Happy to answer them there. I try to do my best to answer as many DMs on LinkedIn as possible, as well as the comments in the YouTube videos. So again, good luck. Good luck on your business buying journey, and I wish you guys all the best.